Hi guys, I'm going to share with you today just some basic information that will help us all in these unique times and these quite challenging times. But we are going to be together for Pesach, and Pesach is one of those times when we really want to get together as family and celebrate a wonderful Chag of Pesach together. So I'm going to share today with you some of the main laws to keep in mind, what we call the halachot, the main laws to focus on, to remember, both in the preparation up until Pesach and then on Pesach itself, what to keep in mind. So, guys, we're home with our families, so that firstly is a good thing because that's one of the main parts of Pesach. So being with family starts in the run-up to Pesach with the concept of cleaning for Pesach. What is cleaning for Pesach? Cleaning for Pesach basically means, firstly, I think it's a good opportunity anyway to do once in a while a spring clean of one's home. It's a good thing. But particularly, obviously, we have a prohibition in the Torah that says during these 7 days that we only to eat unleavened bread called matzah, and therefore any leavened products we are forbidden to eat. And anybody who is celebrating Pesach properly needs to make sure the first thing they do is actually, before you get to the night of the Seder or celebrating Pesach on any level, is actually to get the pre-work done first, which is the work of cleaning out one's home from chametz. Chametz are a Torah prohibition where for the 7 or 8 days in the diaspora, we're not to own any chametz, we're not to get any benefit from chametz, and we're also not to even see any chametz. So how do we do this? So firstly, in the run-up to Pesach, one should clean an area of one's home and leave only one specific area left in the days running up to Pesach, which has chametz in it, and all the other areas should be completely clean of chametz. Then, in kind of the day before Pesach itself, what we call the night of the 14th of Nisan, we actually do something called bedikat chametz, which is the night 24 hours before the Pesach Seder. And what that means is that any chametz that we have, we completely get rid of, and we go through a process of cleaning our home, removing from our kitchen, from our bedrooms, from anywhere in our home, any chametz. And we actually do a little search together with the children of the family and search for chametz, and then take all of any remaining chametz in our house and put them together once we've searched the home, together for the next morning, where we actually do something called bi'ur chametz, which is the burning or the getting rid of the chametz. Any other chametz that we do not find in any other nook or cranny, any other bread product that may be in our home, we should say a special prayer that can be found in a siddur, which basically nullifies and disconnects any person from the chametz that may be in their home, because it is forbidden for a Jew to own chametz during Pesach. The big question arises, what if you have certain products in your home that you're unable to get rid of? In other words, it might be stuff frozen away in the freezer, or, some people may have some whiskey, which we obviously know is chametz, and not everyone wants to get rid of that just before Pesach. So what are you actually supposed to do? So there is another area of halakha called selling your chametz, which basically means that since it's only a prohibition upon Jews to not own chametz or benefit from it or even see chametz and obviously not eat it, that only is a prohibition for somebody who is Jewish. So somebody who's not Jewish, they are able to actually what's called buy the chametz, but we don't actually do this on an individual transactional basis, one person to another. What we do as a Jewish community in an organized fashion is we actually give over all of our chametz that we have sold, that we have in our possession, that we demarcate them, and we say that this area, this cupboard, this freezer, or this section of our home, we are locking away and sealing, and we are selling it. And we say, in Hebrew it's called mechirat chametz, it's called selling your chametz, and we sign a form, and we hand that form in to our local shul, to our rabbi, to the Beth Din, and they will take those forms in and they will do one sale on behalf of the whole community. And that sale then becomes a binding sale, and those chametz for that week of Pesach actually become not in your possession anymore. So what happens next? Now that we're ready for Pesach, we've cleaned our chametz, we've sold our chametz, we've got to prepare for the Seder. So once your house is what we call kasher Pesach, that's all chametz products have been removed, then we've got to cook. We cook for the Pesach Seder, all of the nice delicacies that everybody likes to enjoy, that's obviously kosher for Pesach, but that everyone has on Pesach. Obviously, matzah ball kanedlach soup being everybody's personal favorite. So we then also prepare certain foods which you put on the Pesach plate, and I brought a little Pesach plate over here that everyone can just remember to go through. We have the beitzah, the egg, the zarua, the shank bone, the maror, the charoset, the karpas, and the horseradish, the chazeret, which is all placed upon the Pesach Seder, which all have their own parts which need to be prepared accordingly beforehand, and speak to different themes during the night of the Pesach Seder. What are some of the main mitzvot to keep in mind besides for putting those different ingredients on the Seder plate? So some of the main mitzvot for the night are firstly your matzah, your wine, and the maror. So how do we fulfill these mitzvot on the night of Pesach? So on your Seder night, firstly, we need to have enough matzah. That is the main mitzvah of the night in terms of the eating, is to take at least one full sheet of matzah, one of those squares, the big squares, not the little ones that you have with a cup of tea on Pesach, but those big squares of matzah, and they are placed in front of everybody at the Pesach Seder, and there are actually 3 pieces that are put in front of whoever's going to lead the Pesach Seder, but everybody should get at least one full square of matzah, and you make 2 brachot. One is the bracha of al achilat matzah, for the mitzvah of eating matzah on the night of Pesach, and the other one is the hamotzi lechem in haaretz, which you make generally on a bread meal. And obviously matzah is the substitute for bread that we would normally have challah at a Yom Tov meal. So here we are having matzah. So you make 2 blessings, and then after both those blessings, you eat a full sheet of matzah by itself without any addendums or spreads on it or any other food on it. It's just to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah, which reminds us of the Jews that left Egypt in a hurry and didn't have time for their bread to rise, and therefore we eat matzah on the night of the Seder. And that's a cool mitzvah to do, which is standalone, and that you get that mitzvah just by eating matzah. And one should try and not eat matzah beforehand, definitely not on the day of Pesach, the day before Pesach, just because you want to go into the night of the Seder with what we call gusto or energy or appetite to want to fulfill the mitzvah, and therefore we don't actually eat matzah in the run-up, so we, in a certain sense, feel like having matzah on the night. The next important mitzvah to remember, once you've eaten your matzah, is the drinking of the 4 cups of wine. The 4 cups of wine have a lot of symbolism to it, which is too much to discuss for this kind of 101 and overview, but there's a lot to be said for the 4 cups of wine, and they're drunk throughout different stages of the night. One should make sure you have at least a cup which is 150 milliliters big. That's how much you can drink. If you can't drink wine, you can fulfill your mitzvah of drinking the 4 cups of grape juice. That's absolutely fine. And that's done at various points through the night. The first one is done during Kiddush. The second one is done during the Torah is telling of the story. The third one is done after benching, and the fourth one is done at Hallel, which is at the end. The next mitzvah to remember to do is the eating of the afikomen. We know the famous story where the kids go and the favorite part really of the Seder is to search for the afikomen. When the afikomen is then found, it should actually be eaten as dessert. It should be the very last thing that somebody eats before benching. And the reason for that is you should leave the Seder night still with the taste of the afikomen in your mouth. And then we basically round out the night of the Seder. If one can at least get those mitzvot of the eating the matzah, drinking the 4 cups of wine, the afikomen, then the last one to remember is the maror. The maror is eaten just after the matzah, and that is also about the same size as 1 full sheet of matzah, but this time of eating maror, which is the bitter herbs that remind us of the bitter enslavement of the Jewish people. And the maror, traditionally today we use what we call romaine lettuce in order to fulfill our obligation of eating maror on the night. And again, one should eat about an egg's worth of maror, which equates to about a square, the same size as the matzah. So those are your kind of eating mitzvot and drinking mitzvot for the night. the next important mitzvah to remember on the night of Seder, which is really one of the most important, and that is to tell over the story, what we call Magid, or the telling over the story to the next generation. That this is our grand intergenerational conversation that takes place at the night of the Seder, and it's an opportunity for Zaydas and Bobbas to tell their parents, to then tell their children the concept of Dor LaDor, from generation to generation. We pass on this famous story of who we are and where we came from, and that as Jews we began our national story as slaves in Egypt. And the telling of that story is what we call the mitzvah of Ve'agaret lebincha, you should tell it over to your child, and that is the telling of the story of Pesach. Those are the mitzvahs on the night. Just lastly, to finish off, some other interesting mitzvot that come about around the time of Pesach is that on the second night of the Seder, which in the diaspora is the night of the second Seder, and in Israel will already be after the Seder night and already be into Chol HaMoed, the middle days of Pesach, we begin the counting of the Omer, which starts as a counting between Pesach and Shavuot, and that starts on the second night of the Seder. You must remember to start counting the first night of the Omer already on the second night of Pesach. And something else is the days in between of Pesach are called Chol HaMoed, the in-between days, and they are not Yom Tov days. One is allowed to drive, and the restrictions of a Chag are not placed on the Chol HaMoed days in the middle, but they do still have the theme and the energy and the some of the restrictions that do apply in Chol HaMoed as well, most notably of which is the prohibition of still not eating chametz. So we don't eat chametz for the full week of Pesach and only eat matzah for that whole week. And then the last day of Pesach is called in Hebrew Shavi'i Shel Pesach, the seventh day of Pesach. And this is a very powerful day which remembers the Jews when they got on the seventh day after leaving Egypt, they got to the place where they thought it was the place of no return, where the sea was in front of them and the raging Egyptian army was behind them. And that is the memory or the commemoration of the splitting of the sea. And that is what we commemorate on the seventh night of Pesach. And it is also a festival day, and we have a festive meal. It's not with the strict order of the Seder like the night of the Seder, but it's like any other Yom Tov meal that we would have, where we have meat and wine and a festive atmosphere around the table. But we obviously have matzah and not challah. And with that chag, when that chag comes out and we make havdalah, that is then the end of Pesach, and we can go back to eating chometz, and we also buy back what we said originally, just to end where we started, where you sold your chametz for the week of Pesach. It's after the last chag of Pesach, of Shvish or Pesach, that night when Pesach comes out, you buy back your chametz, which is normally about an hour after Pesach comes out, and then everybody is free once again to tuck into their favorite pizza or burger or whatever their favorite chametz product may be. Hopefully that is a little overview of a 101 of some of the main things to remember for Pesach, and I wish everyone a Chag Kasher v'Sameach.